Franchising is the most misunderstood and most overlooked form of entrepreneurship. We're here to educate you and help you find the entrepreneur within. Franchising is not all about the French fries.
We find that individuals who are exploring business ownership tend to have a lot of misperceptions and misunderstandings about the franchise industry. So what we want to do is help prospective business owners make confident and educated decisions before moving forward or not moving forward with a business. Welcome to Unpredicted Entrepreneur.
Hi, welcome to episode 81 of Unpredicted Entrepreneur. I'm Roxanne Rapsky, and this is my colleague, Sarah Wasco. We created this podcast to bring you education and information about franchising and business ownership. Today, we have a guest. His name is Joe Stafford. We originally met back in 2018 in California, and we worked together there. And then he moved to Texas, and I got to work with him again when he was here. He is a fractional CFO and a franchise owner. So welcome, Joe. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me, Roxanne and Sarah.
Yes.
My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you share your wisdom with us today.
What little I have.
You actually have a lot.
You do.
You have, you've started and co-founded 3 independent businesses. Kelly's owned a franchise, your wife. You own a franchise now. So kind of take us back to how you got bitten by that entrepreneurial bug and working through owning and selling businesses and up until the time I met you, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So I started out in public accounting many moons ago, and I decided very quickly that I didn't want to sell my time for the majority of my career. And I had the opportunity to go to work for a manufacturing company that made memory modules for personal computers in the early 90s. And while I was in college, I think I had a sense that I wanted to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. And when I went to work for that company, that kind of sealed the deal for me. It was a company that was doing about $26 million in revenue when I started in 1992, and it grew to almost $300 million in revenue while I was there for 5 years. And I was the chief financial officer. So I had to figure out how to finance that and a whole bunch of different things. So it was certainly learning on the job. Mm-hmm. It was owned by one guy who was roughly my age. And he was living the lifestyles of the rich and famous, flying private jets. And, so I thought that's something, not so much the private jets, but I'd certainly wanted to be in charge of my own destiny. So I left there in 1997. I'm definitely dating myself now, to start my own business in a similar space, in the electronic space, and started a business with a partner that grew from nothing to almost, now $60 million in revenue in 2000. So about 4 years. We had quite a ride. And then having a partner is a challenge, just like marriage. And we fell out of love with each other and ended up drawing swords against each other. So this was during the dot-com bubble burst. And unfortunately, I spent the majority of my time fighting him rather than actually keeping an eye on the business as it was declining. So ended up shutting that business down. I had personal guarantees on the debt to the bank. So I took about a year off. That's about how long it took to settle with the bank. And then I got back into the same business with no partners and ran it more as a lifestyle business in San Clemente, California. So I could surf in the middle of the day if I wanted to, which I did often. And I ran that business until 2012. In the previous business, we had developed some unique software, and I was able to get control of that software after settling with the bank. So I started another company during that time frame, a software as a service company, one of the earlier software as a service companies that ended up providing brand intelligence for brand holders. So our first customer was Qualcomm, and we ended up with a variety of companies across a variety of industries, certainly in the electronic space where we started, and then we moved into luxury goods, and we moved into entertainment. So I was operational in that business, so I was basically involved in two businesses until about 2009. Then I stepped away from that and got back into the other business that I had started again, and that business, the software company, was sold in 2014, and I sold my other business in 2012. So then I hung out a consulting shingle, basically, because I didn't want to have a payroll, because that might be one of the most thankless jobs in the world. And I ran a consulting business doing fractional CFO work for about 2 years, and then I came on full time with a company, and that's kind of what I've been doing since.
Since the fractional CFO?
Yeah, since about 2014, I've been doing that kind of work.
Okay, all right.
So
aside from owning a franchise.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, how'd you get the franchise bug? Y'all mentioned in the beginning, Roxanne mentioned that your first intro to franchise was for your wife, Kelly, in California, right? Mm-hmm. So was it a situation where she'd been a stay-at-home mom and wanted to get into business, or what prompted her to want to own a business, and specifically a franchise, since you were so entrepreneurial on your businesses?
Yeah, she was a stay-at-home mom. We have two beautiful girls. One's 30 and one's 27. They both live in Portland, Oregon. And we homeschooled our kids for a period of time, so she had her hands full. Our youngest daughter graduated in 2015, and we had put ourselves, I guess, in a position where we could afford to buy a franchise, and she was looking to do something that kind of gave her flexibility, so not really a 9-to-5 corporate job. And she had been out of the workforce for quite a while. Prior to having kids, she worked for her father-in-law, who was in the construction business, and then for a couple of other small businesses. But she wanted to kind of be the captain of her ship, I guess, just like me. And we settled on a concept. I met Roxanne through a networking event in Southern California, in San Diego, and found out what she did. So we started talking, and sure enough, we settled on a business. And so unfortunately, it was catering to restaurants, and primarily to restaurants, but small businesses providing marketing services. And when COVID hit, it just cut the legs out from underneath us. And she had actually, in about a year, built it up to where it was cash flow break even, maybe even a little bit better. And
she had done well.
Yeah, she had done well.
And she liked being out, networking, and meeting all these small business owners. And I think she was having a good time with the business. And as we all know, COVID hit and changed a lot of things. And that was right around the time you guys were talking about, because now you're on with a company, and that company was talking about moving you to Texas.
Yeah, it was my choice whether to move to Texas or not. And we had been wanting to get out of California for a long time. My wife is a native, and I'm effectively a native Californian. But I don't get into politics here, but it just got a little wacky in California, and still
we all know.
You're in Texas. It's okay.
It continues to get wackier. So
yes, it does.
So we had looked at a variety of different places, and then this opportunity came up. The company I was working for had a branch office in Farmers Branch, of all places, and I moved out here.
And then you guys get out here, and then you want to meet for coffee again to talk about business ownership, because now you're thinking, well, things weren't kind of working out at your company.
Yeah, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
for sure. The idea was that they were going to move operations from Irvine, California to here. It was a father and son that were co-owners of the business, and it just became apparent that they weren't going to move the operations out here, at least in my time frame. So I ended up leaving there, and then now what am I going to do? So that's when I contacted you again.
So we looked at some things, and you liked one segment specifically.
Yes.
You like those STEM type of businesses. You kind of wanted to make a difference and teach young children. So we looked at a couple things. You were kind of honed in on one, but then you found something else that was available in the market that was a resale. Kelly was driving around and said, "Oh, what's that?"
Yes.
And it wasn't a brand that I worked with. So I couldn't help you with that one as much as I could if it was something that I worked with. So you kind of went down this road, did your own due diligence. Did I say that right? Due diligence?
You did.
Okay. I thought I left out a syllable somewhere. So kind of tell us about that, your learnings from that.
And just to clarify, she mentioned a resale. So just if listeners maybe don't know what that means when we say resale, it was an existing business that is a franchise and was for sale. And you guys felt that was appealing. A lot of people do. It's up and running, and there's a lot of advantages to something like that rather than having to get started and build out and some of those things. And so anyway, back to Roxanne's question, but I just wanted to kind of clarify that for anybody that might not have known what we meant when we said a resale.
Thank you.
Yes, it was a resale, and it was actually we bought it from the franchisor who had bought it from the original franchisees. So the franchisor bought it. The original franchisees started it up in 2019 and actually had a lot of success in the first year and a half that they owned it. And then they sold it to the franchisor in February of 2020, which was really bad timing for an in-person type of a concept. So the franchisor struggled with it for basically 2 years, 2+ years. And then they got it up to a level of revenue that was appealing to us, assuming that obviously the revenue continued on. And we had actually bought a territory already here in Dallas, and we unfortunately couldn't find real estate that fit the model. So the way Dallas is laid out and the territory that we owned, we bought this existing location, and basically the concept was we were going to own all of North Dallas effectively. But it became quickly apparent that the business wasn't running at the level that the franchisor was running it. I'm not saying that they did anything wrong. We made some mistakes right out of the gate. We struggled and have been struggling for the last, I guess it's going on 21 months, 21 months.
Yeah.
So, it had, as you said, it didn't quite turn out the way you expected, and that you guys made some mistakes. And I think we always want to share, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and help people that are going through this process and maybe know what to avoid. So would you be willing to just share maybe some of the mistakes you made and some of the things that people might want to keep in mind if they're in the same position?
Or if they're buying a resale, right?
Yeah.
So it's good to have not always the rainbow stories, but a real story of a struggle too. So we're glad you're here to share.
Yes. So I guess first and foremost, Roxanne had mentioned diligence, and I did a fair amount of diligence being a finance guy. What I probably didn't do was speak to enough of the existing franchisee base. I think we probably talked to 4 or 5 folks. And we actually talked to, I think, at least one person that decided not to go forward. But I think the fundamental mistake that I made is that I kind of fell in love with the idea of controlling all of North Dallas for this concept. And I was going to try and make that happen kind of at all costs, if you will. So the plan was to buy this existing location and then, in 6 months to 12 months, get financing from the SBA to open up a second location, because this particular concept, it's probably about $350,000 to $400,000, I would say, between fixed costs and then working capital to keep the business running as you start to build up your clientele. So that was probably the biggest mistake I made, was falling in love with the notion that I'm going to be king of North Dallas.
Did you say king of North Dallas?
Yes, yeah. Not king of Tulsa, but king of North Dallas, or Tulsa King, or whatever that show is that Sylvester Stallone is in.
I watched that actually.
Did you?
Yes.
So it's, I think not, and also not being kind of honest with myself about, because I saw some problems, but I talked myself out
So you
of
let
those.
emotion
I let
play into
emotion,
this big time.
play into this.
Yeah.
For sure.
And the other thing that I'll point out is when we worked together, you had a budget.
Yeah.
And your budget was about half of what you ended up spending because you fell in love with this concept. So another learning, I think, that's all falling into that.
The idea was we were going to bring STEM teaching to kids in the North Dallas area.
Yeah.
And that was appealing to you.
It was
very appealing. I kind of have this sense, most of our students today are young boys. I'd say 90 to 95% of our students are young boys. And I think that young boys are kind of getting the short shrift in our society these days. If you look at college enrollments, whatever the case may be, girls are certainly excelling, despite what you hear. It's about 60-40 now who's going into college, girls over boys.
Mm. And these are the kids that are, like you said, they're probably not the star athletes, and you're trying to provide them an opportunity. Yeah. So
some of them are, I would say, they're certainly not the star athletes. They're not. They may play sports, but they're, not going to go anywhere with it.
Get a football scholarship or whatever.
They're not going to get a football scholarship. Yeah. There's a very good chance of that. So, and I would say most of the kids that are coming to our campus are really, really excited about, the time that they spend at our campus. So,
so there's that's a positive, making a positive impact, and all those things are key. And sometimes it's hard to not let that influence you when you're making a decision. We talk a lot about, think about what the business will do for you instead of what the business does. But in a situation like that, it's totally understandable that was appealing to you. So you ended up, you said you kind of saw some red flags, but you went ahead and moved forward. And then you had shared with us some of the things that you had really learned once that happened, and you were kind of ramping up the business, like how you're marketing the business and some things from the franchisor. So share that with us a little bit also.
So I guess maybe another, if just to go back to your previous question, another fundamental mistake I made is that I had come up with a valuation for the business. I thought that was a fair price. That's what I offered to the franchisor, and we were about 20% apart, I would say, maybe 25%. And I ended up folding basically and agreeing to his price. So that was another mistake that I made. But to your question, Sarah, I think once we got started, we inherited what they call a campus director as well as an assistant campus director. And we had a lease that was completely unreasonable. It's funny, we ended up not developing the territory that we bought in sort of down towards downtown Dallas in University Park Cities area because of real estate price. And then we end up getting into a lease that is completely unreasonable. So that was another mistake I made. And I thought the landlord was looking out for our best, not the landlord, of course the landlord wouldn't be, but the franchisor was looking out for our best interests. And that was clearly not the case because we got into a lease that was...
I have a question about that because you said the franchisor negotiated the lease for you. Yeah. Were you involved in that process at all?
Not really in the negotiation. I was certainly involved in the signing of the lease, but I was not involved in the negotiation.
Which I think is odd because how could, in my mind, I'm like, how can someone agree on a lease price without you approving that? Like, how?
Well, I approved. I mean, I agreed to the price. But,
it was.
I should have been in there driving a harder bargain. But
gotcha.
Being new to Dallas and not knowing kind of the real estate market, and it's different from California because they price things on an annual basis here, as opposed to in California, it's usually monthly price. So
Plus, it's really gone up here in the last few years because
Although
of
it's
all
gone down quite a bit.
Now it's gone back down. Yeah.
I'm intrigued that the franchisor negotiated the lease for you too. I don't know how common that is.
I don't
they have a real estate group, and they wanted us. So when we were looking for a facility for the other territory, they wanted us to use their group. And I had a guy that I had worked with at the company that I came out here, and I said, no, I want to use him because I wanted to have my own representation, so to speak. But once I moved off of that, or trying to find a facility for that territory, and went to the resale, it was in the franchisors kind of ballpark, so to speak.
Because they were already in that lease.
They were already in the
had
lease.
That location.
They knew the people. They knew the landlord well.
Well, and the other thing that you said was the way that you modeled the business. You did your financial model based on the way it was presented.
Yes.
By the franchisor as far as what you would be paying for rent, but you ended up paying double that. And you actually had a larger facility too, right?
Yes. So we didn't it wasn't quite double that. It was about a third higher.
Okay.
And we ended up with a much larger facility than the model called for. It was one of the earlier, I think it was the third location in the system.
Oh.
And they have this grandiose kind of look and feel to the facility. So there's all this cut glass, and we had capacity. One of the attractive things was a typical facility today has capacity for about 32 students on any given class period. And we have capacity for almost 60. So I was thinking, well, if we could just fill this place up, I mean, then everything's going to be great. But that proved to be much more difficult. And then to the point that you brought up, Sarah, in terms of marketing, we didn't start digital marketing soon enough. And when we did start it, we ended up using a person that worked at another location. And that was all above board with the owner of that location, but obviously it was her full-time job at that location. And, we weren't maybe the top priority for her. So we ended up working with her for about 3 months, but we didn't start really marketing until March. And we ended up, like I said, working with her for about 3 months. And then we switched to a full-time marketing agency. And when you switch, you basically have to start all over again. So that set us back further. And then the other mistake we made, we followed the franchisor's lead because they have another location here in the DFW area, and they raised prices, and we followed suit. And we probably shouldn't have done that. We probably should have gotten a better feel for the business and where our clientele was economically. So that was.
Do you feel like you lost some students when you raised the price?
Yeah. We lost students, and I think we lost momentum. So we ended up, then having to kind of backpack. We were on our heels, backpedal, not backpack, but we were on our heels trying to, issue coupon codes and so on and so forth, just to try and attract people. So bringing it back down to the price it was the previous year.
It's so hard to know because you think, if you could raise prices and it could work the other way too. It's just hard to know, I think, until you try it.
Yeah, I think it depends on where you're located, because there are other franchisees here in the DFW area that are charging much higher prices, but they're in maybe more affluent areas than where we're located.
You got to, I guess, study the demographics and know what the household incomes are and who can afford it and who can't. It's hard to know all these things, even when you're with a franchise who's giving you a model and advice. It doesn't always work out the way you would think it would. And we always say this, that not all franchises are created equal. I mean, they're just all very different.
And markets are different too. So like you said, what's working in one may not be working in another. And they do give you that guideline. Some are more strict about requiring you to follow that. Some give you a little more leeway and flexibility.
Yeah.
So,
well, you have a complete flexibility with this model in terms of setting your price, but we didn't know.
Right. I mean, that's what's
where
hard.
We should set them.
Yeah. trying to get your feet wet and then make changes all at once to try to see what makes the most sense.
Yeah.
So if somebody is listening today and maybe thinking about buying a franchise, you've had a lot of experiences, positive and negative, with the 2 brands that you've purchased. What tips or advice could you give them?
So what I would say is be prepared for a ride, sometimes bumpy, sometimes very rewarding. If it works out, it's going to be probably one of the most rewarding things you'll do in your career. But if you've been in corporate America, get ready to do some things you're probably not accustomed to doing. So, maybe like cleaning the location and the toilets, things of that nature. So it's you're going to be wearing a lot of different hats than what you would have probably done in your previous positions, whatever they may be. We've got people we have a cleaning crew that comes in, but maybe cash flow isn't affording that at your franchise location, so you're going to have to do that. And then the other thing is bringing management skills to the table is going to be critical, but also knowing the type of people that you're going to be managing, because most of our what we call instructors are in some cases high school, but the vast majority are college-age students. So this may be their first job, and their values may be a little different than what mine are or what yours are as a franchisee. So be prepared for that, and you got to be flexible, because that's kind of, at least in our case, the staff is our bread and butter.
Yeah, I think that's key, knowing who your employees are going to be and if you're going to be comfortable managing those employees. I always would joke that if I were to buy a business because it was something that I loved, I would own a Dairy Queen, because I can't drive past a Dairy Queen without stopping.
That would not be good.
That would not, yeah. But, to own a business like that, you're going to be managing a lot of teenagers and things like that. And I know that I would not be good at that. I just know that well.
They show up sometimes when they want to show up.
Yeah.
They're always not prepared. So,
and you always have to be recruiting and interviewing.
We do have to be recruiting. Fortunately, we're very close to UTD, so we haven't had a challenge getting staff in, but it's, the quality of the staff varies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we hear a lot of just staffing in general is a challenge.
It can, for sure. I'm sure a lot of that depends on the type of people you're hiring. And, our last guest was just talking about some of the things that he's done to try to retain employees. So that's beneficial as well.
We tried some things like that. We would, on a quarterly basis, we'd pay out commissions to staff for children that came in to do free trials. And if they converted, we'd pay out commissions. But it just didn't seem to move the needle. It was really strange. I mean, I would think, a couple $100 or $300 would be...
That'd motivate me.
Would be, well, especially when you're getting paid $15 an hour. I mean, that makes a big difference. You got to work a lot of hours to get to $300 or $200 at $15 an hour. So
it's interesting, but we've had the same experience at our gyms, incentivizing for, competitions and things like that, incentivizing for new memberships. And I don't know if it's maybe that age group doesn't, kind of grasp the whole commission thing, or just has other priorities. But it's interesting because it has been a similar experience.
They're not motivated by money, it would appear, at least.
Yeah. Times have changed.
Yeah.
So,
well, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you to ask you about your experiences, or needed a fractional CFO, someone to help them run their business and understand it, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, they could connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is linkedin.com/in/JM staff, STAFF. My email address is jstafford, STAFFORD, at trinitybiz advisors.com. And that's my website as well, trinitybizadvisors.com.
Trinitybizadvisors.com.
Yes.
Got it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know you are busy and we appreciate you taking time out to share with us and our listeners your experiences today. Again, I am Sarah Waskow. It's Waskow, joined by my colleague Roxanne Rapske, Rapske. Look us up on LinkedIn as well. We are very active there. We would love to connect with you. You can also find Unpredicted Entrepreneur wherever you get your podcast. Please follow our YouTube channel at FranNet of Dallas, Fort Worth, and Oklahoma as well. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.
Bye.